If you've ever seen the awesome animated series Helluva Boss over on Vivziepop's channel, you know that there's already plenty of supernatural and horror elements in it, but it's not a story that's presented as a horror story. It's more of a raunchy, thirsty action comedy with some really great musical numbers. That's probably the best way I can describe it. But I thought it would be fun to try and adapt it into an actual horror story since it has some of those elements already. Give the characters a bit of a creepy PopCross style redesign, tell a story from a human perspective who's getting hunted down by the characters from the show, while also trying to work in some of the elements that Helluva Boss fans come for. I'm personally very excited about this concept, so let's see how it goes, shall we? Let's go. Hit like if you want, subscribe if you feel like, but either way, enjoy the show. When Viv heard the first subtle bumps from downstairs, she assumed it was just the building settling. Her parents' farmhouse, often used as a summer getaway, was big and nice, but quite old and would rarely go a few minutes without some part of it creaking. But quickly, she started to question the sounds below. She sat up in bed and intently listened. Her heart thudded as her mind raced to all the worst possibilities, then jumped to thoughts that she was being a baby and just imagining things. The sounds were quiet, but she swore she could make out the sound of light tapping feet on the hardwood below. The pounding in her chest slowed as her mind settled on a thought that it was likely a raccoon or maybe even a deer that had gotten in. It had happened before since the door didn't always properly shut. Now she was just irritated and tired. Why was this happening to her? She desperately needed some sound sleep and a peaceful week away from everything to try and get her mind off the incident. Now she had to deal with this? She rolled out of bed and put on her slippers. She opened her closet and grabbed an old unstrung archery bow to use as a prod to lead out whatever animal had gotten in. Even just seeing the bow sent jolts of an echoing voice through her. Jace, still in her head, reminding her all the reasons she should give up on her marksman training. More thoughts came flooding in, but she tried to ignore them and focus on the task at hand. She opened the door and walked as quietly as she could down the hall to the stairs. She could more clearly hear the pattering of feet, but couldn't make out the size of the animal from what she heard. The steps definitely seemed too loud for a raccoon. She crept down the stairs, holding the bow out in front of her. She moved down, and then, halfway to the main floor, the sounds stopped. Maybe the thing had heard her. Maybe she should have stomped louder on purpose to scare it off. She thought about flicking on the light switch, but didn't want to spook the thing and have it smash up a bunch of stuff as it tried to scatter out. She finished her walk down the stairs and looked around. The farmhouse creaked, but nothing else moved or made noise. Her heart started to thud again. Those steps had been too quiet to be a person, right? But now she wasn't sure. She was about ready to take a step back up the stairs to grab her phone in her room when a shadow down the hall to the front door caught her eye. The moonlight spilling into the kitchen cast a faint outline on the ground of something standing in the kitchen. She couldn't make out much about it. If she didn't know the property as well as she did, she would have thought it was the shadow of a tree through the window, but there weren't any trees close enough to the building, and this thing was moving. Part of its body, almost like a long tail, was swaying side to side, making its shadow dance along the wood floor. Viv's whole body got a chill that screamed at her to run, to just bolt for the back door, but she ignored the instinct. An old familiar voice again echoed in her head, telling her she was being stupid and paranoid, saying she was a coward and she was just seeing things. A whole slew of insults echoed through her mind. She turned to head back up the stairs to grab her phone just to be safe, but as her eyes trailed up to the second floor, there, at the top of the stairs, was the silhouette of a gangly, spiky creature with glowing yellow eyes that pierced the darkness. With a gurgling, demonic call, it said,
"You, Viv? Because if so, we got a little message for you from your old pal Jace."
Viv couldn't understand what she was seeing. She tried to flick on the light, but nothing happened.
"Oh please, cutting the power is step one. What do you think we are, amateurs?"
She turned to run for the back door, but now another red, short, humanoid creature was standing just outside. She turned again and sprinted for the front door, knowing there was another creature near there, but hoping she could just shoot by it. She couldn't. As she passed the kitchen, something swung right for her head. Instinctively, Viv flopped back to the ground, ducking just under a bloodied axe that whipped overhead and thudded into the wall.
Oh, good reflexes, girl.
A monstrous female-looking imp said as it ripped its blade free.
Maybe you ain't as pathetic as Jace said you'd be.
She reeled back the axe again and swung down. Viv rolled aside, away from the door, barely missing the blow. She leapt up to the nearest door, to the basement, and tore it open, then slammed it shut behind her, locking it. But not a second later, the blade of the axe cracked through the wood. Viv fell backwards and crashed down the stairs into the pitch-black basement. She hit the cold cement floor, panting like she'd just sprinted a marathon. She couldn't have misheard them, right? Those things had both said, Jace. Her mind flashed to the last time she'd seen him drunkenly slipping from the ledge of the old diving cliffs, her close enough to reach down and grab him as he clung to the side, but hesitating for just 1 second. 1 second long enough for him to lose his grip and fall to his death. The axe slammed again into the door above, then again and again. They'd be through soon. Viv tried to get up, but as she put her weight on her left foot, she collapsed to the ground again. It felt like her bones in her ankle had shifted, and she let out an agonized scream. The axe slammed again, and a head peeked through the door.
Oh, don't go torturing yourself, hon. We got plenty of that in store for you ourselves.
Viv got up again, but she leaned on her bow as best she could and hobbled towards the one slit of light spilling into the room through the hatch doors to outside. A voice echoed again in her mind, telling her that she was doomed. She might as well give up or even just kill herself before those things got to her. She was too useless to save herself. As always, that voice was Jace's. But she kept pushing and did her best to limp up the stairs, unlatch the doors, and push them open. She pulled herself out onto the moonlit grassy field, and her eyes immediately fell onto the barn. She felt the unstrung bow digging into her armpit as she leaned against it. She knew she had a spare string for it in the barn, and there were plenty of arrows as well. Maybe she could defend herself. But more importantly, in the barn, she had a ride. Before she could take one step forward, a tail wrapped around her neck and lifted her up to the second floor.
You're really not making this easy on us, kid. You stop trying to run and we'll make this a bit quicker than we promised Jace we would.
It was the first imp she'd seen, leaned out her bedroom window, squeezing its tail tighter and tighter around her neck. She held on and tried to pull it off, but it was no use. The axe-wielding devil ran out from the basement below and looked up.
Oh, a pinata. Don't mind if I do.
She thrust back her axe. Viv's instincts kicked in and she kicked herself back from the wall. The axe sliced right in front of her and chopped straight through the tail binding her. She fell to the ground, trying to make most of her weight fall on her good leg. She immediately scrambled across the ground towards the barn, hearing the creature above screaming things so profane she felt like she needed to shower just from hearing him. The two imps bickered behind her as she pulled herself up and ran for the barn. Every step on her bad leg shot explosions of pain up her body, but she kept pushing. But quickly, she noticed the sound of other, faster feet speeding up behind her. Viv whipped her head back, and once again her instincts took over. She thrust her bow behind her and just barely knocked a bladed tail off course from hitting her chest. It cut a gash into her arm as a third imp creature tackled into her, knocking her to the ground just 10 feet from the barn. She tried to roll towards it, but the tail swung down again, and she stopped just before it hit her.
This is nothing personal, kid. I don't even like that Jace guy, but a client's a client. Between you and me, you did let him fall on purpose, right?
Oh please, you were just too useless to save me. The voice screeched through her mind again, but she ignored it. Viv spun over and smashed her bow as hard as she could into the creature's head. As he recovered, she crammed her fingers into both sets of its 4 eyes, then shoved it away from her. It thrashed its tail around, blinded, and a blow tore right into her back, but she ignored the pain, pulled herself up, and hobbled into the barn. As she moved through it, she unlatched the gate for her ride as she stumbled towards the archery equipment. Her whole body shook as she flopped down and tried desperately to string up her bow. Once again, the vile voice rang through her head. You're never gonna make it. You've only gotten this far by luck. You couldn't save me, and you're sure as hell not gonna be able to save yourself. Her hands trembled as she kept missing the hole as she tried to attach the other end of the string to the bow. Then, still rubbing its eyes, the four-eyed imp marched into the barn towards her.
I tried to be friendly about this, but if you're gonna go for cheap shots, then so will I.
It raised its gangly clawed fingers.
Let's see how you like getting poked in the eyes, huh?
Before Viv even realized what she was doing, she had her fingers in her mouth and whistled as loudly as she could. Suddenly, from behind the gate that she'd unlatched, a set of powerful hind legs thrust out like lightning. The hooved feet slammed into the imp's head, and it shot across the barn, smashing right into the wall. Viv's horse then trotted out from the corner of the barn towards her. "Thanks, Striker," Viv stammered through her pain. The cruel voice started to chime in her mind again, that was just luck and she couldn't do this, but immediately, this time, she just shut it up. Viv finally realized that every time that night she'd listened to her instincts and ignored the grating, vile voice carved into her mind from too many years with Jace, she had managed to get herself out of danger. It was time to do what she knew she could do. She took a deep breath, and in one swift move, she strung up the bow. She tossed a quiver over her shoulders and leaned up against Striker, just as the axe-wielding imp ran into the doors and saw the other imp, still unconscious, half smashed through a wall.
Baby, what did you do to my Moxie, you little...
Before it could finish the insult, an arrow ripped across the barn and pierced right through the imp's axe-wielding arm. It shrieked as it dropped the weapon. Viv loaded up another shot, but the imp ducked under it, cursing like a demon as it grabbed the axe again with its other arm and ran from the barn. Viv pulled herself up onto Striker's back and loaded up another shot. "Wherever you are, Jace, I hope you get to see this." Viv and Striker burst from the barn, and her eyes shot everywhere for the imps. A gleam caught the corner of her eye as she instinctively ducked back, just dodging as the axe soared over her head across the field. She whipped her bow around and fired at the female imp running at her. The shot was perfectly aimed for its head, but it thrust its tail out in front and the arrow pierced that instead. The imp shrieked angrily as Viv loaded up another shot. Striker whinnied, and Viv's eyes darted to her other side, just in time to see the original imp coming at her again, axe in hand.
If I'm losing a tail today, I'm making sure you lose a whole lot more than that.
In midair, with the creature inches away from her face, Viv pulled out an arrow and thrust it with her hand straight into the creature's neck. It stopped its swing, but still tackled into her, knocking her off of Striker. They both rolled across the ground and arrows fell all around Viv. She quickly tore the axe out of the imp's hand, thrust it up, then slammed it down. It saw and tried to roll away, but she still managed to chop its hand right off. It screamed in pain as Striker galloped around it and kicked it across the field. Viv grabbed an arrow off the ground and sat up, aiming all around, looking for the female imp, but couldn't see it anywhere. She grabbed a few more arrows and pulled herself once again up onto Striker's back. They slowly walked back towards the barn. Inside, she saw that the four-eyed imp was gone. She looked up and around but saw nothing, but soon she heard a sound. Not like anything the imps had made. It was more of a heavy growling, as if coming from a bear, but more unnatural. Heavy footsteps thumped outside the barn as Viv readied up another shot and waited. Lumbering up into the doorway was a white and black wolf, snarling and standing on its hind legs nearly 13 feet tall. It glanced at Viv with its leering red eye peering at her through a cascade of its white hair. She held her shot ready and waiting, but something inside her told her not to fire, so she held back. A moment passed, and the creature seemed to roll its eyes at her, then marched on. Unsure of what to do, Viv and Striker walked up to the edge of the barn door so they could see out. The wolf walked up to the mangled, tailless imp laying unconscious on the ground. It grabbed it by the leg and dragged it across the property, glancing back and snarling at Viv, but making no move on her. Striker followed slowly at a distance behind the wolf as it moved around to the back of the barn with the imp in tow. They turned a corner to see a glowing, red portal through which the wolf tossed the unconscious imp, then stepped through itself. Just on the other side of the doorway, along with the other imps tending to their wounds, was Jace. Pale and covered in cuts and soaking wet, as if he'd just died moments ago instead of weeks ago. He snarled at her and called through the portal, which was slowly starting to close. "This isn't over, Viv. You're gonna join me down here soon enough. You got lucky this time, but I can send these freaks over and over and over again." Part of her mind shrieked in terror and anger, but that part was no longer louder than her true voice. She smirked and said, "I dare you to." She whipped back another shot of her arrow and fired it right through the closing portal. She got the tiniest glimpse of it piercing right through his eye, and the faintest start of a scream as the doorway finally closed. Closed on the creatures, closed on Jace, and closed on that dark chapter of her life. Wow, with how this turned out and the Hollow Knight horror story episode, I think I gotta use this as a theme more often, taking things and turning them into horror stories. It's a lot of fun. By the way, if you've never seen Helluva Boss, I'll link the first episode in the description. It's a super fun show. I'd watched it before I even started getting requests from subscribers to do an episode around it. Though fair warning, this channel is fairly PG, Helluva Boss is very much not. You've been warned. And of course, if you're new to the channel and you want more episodes like this, maybe check out my Phobias as Demons series, where I take famous phobias and turn them into demons. I'll link the most recent episode in the cards. But besides that, that's all for today, except of course for ending this video on some kind of positive or uplifting note. And the thought I want to leave people with today is actually a quote that partially inspired the story arc for this episode, which is a quote from Sherlock Holmes. "Do not ignore your intuition. It's simply data processed too fast for your conscious mind to comprehend." Been learning a lot about intuition over the last few months, and I've made some pretty good decisions based on my own. Hope that's helpful to someone out there. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next episode on Friday. When is this coming out? Yeah, Friday. Mondays and Fridays. That's when videos come out. See you there. Goodbye.